You have to be passionate about this job, but there's always that voice in your head. What if this goes wrong?
Try our best to make sure we go in alive and come out the same way.
These hills don't mess around.
Timber Titans, Sunday, February 15th at 8, and available on the Weather Channel TV app.
Well, the icebreakers keeping busy across the Northeast and the Great Lakes. Now, Lake Erie alone, 95% covered right now. Makes sense. It is our most shallow of the Great Lakes, and not like that it talks bad about the other lakes. It's actually physically shallow. All right, let's look at the Great Lakes ice cover. We've seen it shoot up here given how cold it has been. When we look at the ice cover compared to average, you can see that the month of January, especially the second half, we saw that exceptional increase. Now current ice cover over 50%. That puts us well above average. Now, a lot of these lakes, Ontario, Superior, they are much deeper, so they are not going to see, significant or total ice coverage in a given season. You can see exactly what I'm talking about. So here's Ontario, just a little bit of ice towards the western side of the eastern side of the lake. Lake Erie, meanwhile, mostly ice covered, and that's why places like Buffalo, like Erie, may begin to shut down when it comes to lake effect. If you get ice cover over the lake, you're no longer going to have that differential between the warmer lake waters and the very cold air. So you'll continue to see lake effect in places like Syracuse, whereas Buffalo tends to quiet down. Michigan, obviously, plenty open, and again, the heart of Lake Superior, we've got quite a bit of open water there. Huron, a little bit more ice cover around the perimeter. So all of that added up puts us at about or just over 50% of ice coverage. And through the late part of the week, we are going to see more of that cold focused around the Great Lakes. Tomorrow, Thursday, Friday morning, you can see those lows below 32 and in some cases well below 32 focused up there across the upper Great Lakes, the Midwest, and the Northeast. So focused into our Great Lakes states. There's the dip in the jet stream that stays over the eastern part of the country. So expect temperatures tomorrow in the 20s. Those are your high temperatures. Meanwhile, farther to the south, we've got some melting, not a huge amount, but temps in the 30s and 40s, upper 30s and 40s are going to allow for some of that melting. Now, by Thursday, Friday, we've got that colder air diving much farther to the south. So that dip in the jet stream really enhances, and that's going to allow for that cold to again reach our southeast states, even parts of Florida. Highs on Thursday, 50s for Tallahassee and Orlando. We've got 40s in Atlanta and Montgomery and Charleston, 30s in Raleigh and Nashville and D.C. Highs only in the 20s in places like Pittsburgh. Now in Detroit, where the average high this time of year is right around freezing, we're staying about 10 degrees below the mark Wednesday and Thursday. Friday, that'll be our mildest day, pretty close to average. Saturday, meanwhile, temps plummet into the upper teens for highs.
It's a really old house, and amazingly, we haven't had any water issues. I think just the enormity of the storm over the last week has really brought all the water inside. It'll be interesting to see once the weather does warm up and the sun comes out and we get a little bit of a thaw, how much more water damage there might be for everyone's houses.
Roofers in Pittsburgh staying busy this week because of the mess the freezing temperatures are creating. They've responded to hundreds of calls about damage from ice dams, which formed during the warming and freezing cycles and push water under shingles and into homes' attic and eventually through the ceiling. Well, speaking of warming and cooling off, ups and downs. We're going to have some changes in the ridge trough pattern we've had. Ridge over the west will be just so much warmer than usual there, and we're about to deal with some of the coldest air of the season in the northeast when we get to this weekend. But at that point, that's the beginning of the end of the ridge west trough east pattern staying locked in, because there's the big ridge, and watch how it starts to make headway to the east. And then we've got a trough off the west coast starting early next week after the big game in Santa Clara, where it'll be a little chillier this weekend than it has been this week, but a lot chillier next week because that trough moves on shore. And then, wow, what a nice change. A big ridge will be sitting over the south central part of the country middle of next week. In fact, Houston next week will be between 75 and 80 degrees for highs pretty much every day next week. Even places like Indianapolis, middle to late next week, will have their low temperatures stay above freezing and get some rain. So that will mean a noticeable change. So when you look at the work week leading up to Valentine's Day, which is on Saturday the 14th, the middle of the country is the focus, like I mentioned, where that big ridge will be the strongest there in the southern plains. But the northeast might stay a little bit chilly until we get to Valentine's weekend, when that ridge moves a little farther to the east. In terms of what the entire month looks like, this is looking out, several more weeks. In general, though, we could still be dry out west, and we'll have northern tier systems, but not a lot of precipitation.